Hello everybody and thank you for joining me. This is Sierra from Sierra T Designs, and today I have this really pretty pink, gold, and white watercolor card to share with you guys. So let's jump right in. So as you guys know, I like to cut down my cardstock. I like to know what I'm working with, so I'm going to cut down a piece of my Arches Cold Press watercolor cardstock here. This is probably my favorite watercolor cardstock, and I hoard it like something awful. I hate to use it because it's not cheap to start with, and I like it so much that I don't know, I'm so bad for that, but I'm trying really hard to use my stuff more, so I am going to use it. But I also have a piece of, this is Gold Pearl Mirror cardstock by Tonic. It's stunning. This is the first time I've used it. It's not quite as mirror-y, if that's a word. It's more of a pearlescent gold, right? So it's not quite as in your face as a normal mirrored cardstock, which I really actually like. I think it's really pretty. And here you can see I'm going to create my layers. So I do have an A2 sized card, so I cut down my watercolor cardstock to about 1/4 of an inch smaller, and then my gold piece at 1/8 of an inch smaller than my base. So I'm going to do a little bit of a watercolor wash in the background here. I have some Distress inks. I have Tattered Rose, Worn Lipstick, and Abandoned Coral. And you saw that I took a big flat brush and just put water all over the back of my watercolor cardstock, or on my watercolor cardstock. And then I'm going to kind of swipe on the 3 colors, and there's no real rhyme or reason, to be honest with you. I just kind of swipe it on wherever I think it's going to look good, and that's kind of all I did. And once I have all the color on there, I do actually bring in a little bit more water to kind of make it a little more subtle. If you guys have been watching my channel for a little while, you know that I have a tendency to go towards very bold colors. So this was kind of my attempt to do something a little bit more subtle, a little bit more delicate is maybe the way I would put it. I'm trying to kind of broaden my creative horizons, so this is kind of what I was thinking here. And I just went in for a second layer of color. I did let it dry in between. I actually used my Ranger heat tool to dry it in between the color layers, just because I wanted to add a little more color. And then here you can see that I go across it with just clean, clear water to kind of just help the colors move a little bit. And I added a bit more Tattered Rose too, because it's such a subtle color. So then I'm going to bring in the Simon Says Stamp Etched Laurel leaves. I am obsessed with these leaves. I am so in love with them. I did not realize how much I loved leaves until recently, and now I kind of just want to use them on everything. So I did choose to use them for this card. And I did also bring in the Lawn Fawn Pearl Vellum, which is what you see that I've cut here. It is very delicate, so you can see that I'm trying really hard to just lightly lift it out of the etched leaves because it will rip. It's a vellum, so it's quite delicate. I do get it out, but it does take me a minute to kind of get it out. And I do bring in the pick tool there, the retractable pick tool. I call it the pokey tool, but I did use that to kind of help me lift it from the die, because the die is so intricate. It does literally cut in all of those little lines. So it is a bit delicate to work with, but I think that it worked out really well. And then because I don't want to waste any of this gold cardstock, I used it as well, and I just cut it out of my base panel because you're not going to see it. As you can see here, I'm showing you, like, I'm just going to adhere my watercolor cardstock on top, so you're not even going to see that I cut out these leaves. Well, you guys know that I cut out the leaves, but the recipient of this card won't know. So I kind of think that's a great way to use what you have, especially if you don't have very much of it. And some of this cardstock is sometimes hard to find, for me anyway. So I kind of like to try to use what I've got there. So you can see that I cut them out of the vellum, the pearlescent vellum, and I also cut them out of the gold, and I cut one more set out of just plain white cardstock, the same cardstock I used for the base of this card. And here I'm just going to adhere it down. I was a little concerned that the pieces might try to stick up, and I didn't want to fight any layers sticking up when I went to adhere my watercolor cardstock. So I did adhere this, and I'm just eyeballing the lineup. I tend to do that quite a bit. I usually am pretty good at it. And then I did bring in my Misty just to add weight and hold it down. And here I just really wanted a little bit of gold splatter in the background. So I brought out my Finetec Pearlescent set of watercolors, excuse me, and just added a little bit of water to that one color of gold there. I thought it matched my gold cardstock actually fairly well. And I just flicked it onto the background, kind of willy-nilly. There's no real rhyme or reason. I'm just kind of going it. And it's a very delicate splatter. You'll see it here in the end when I lift it up to show it to you, but for now it is fairly delicate. And I did want to adhere down my watercolor cardstock because it is a little bit warped. I did choose to adhere this down before I added anything else on it, just so that I could keep it flat. And I am going to bring in my Misty again here in a second to hold it down so that it adheres to this mirror cardstock. But I got it lined up and kind of got it to start adhering, and then I brought in my Misty and just set it on top. And I did cut out a thanks word die. This is the Honeybee Thanks Buzzwords die cut, or Honeycut. I am going to bring in a sentiment as well and stamp it on the inside of the card. And I would suggest that you actually stamp on the inside of the card before you do everything else. But I always forget to decorate the inside of my cards. So honestly, I did it as the last step of this card. But it does make it a smidge more difficult. Not impossible, as you'll see here when I show you that part of the card, but it would have been easier had I done that before I adhered everything, but I didn't know, so there you go, right? I did cut it out of 4 times out of just a white cardstock, and I'm adhering them all together just to add some dimension. And then I did end up cutting out the, I guess it's like a base for this, the thanks word die, just to kind of create some variation between it and the cardstock. So here you'll see the watercolor panel, sorry. So here you see that I cut out also like a shadow layer for my thanks. And this is done in that same pearlescent vellum, just because I really didn't want to cover up all of that beautiful color in the background. And also I didn't really want, like I couldn't put white under it. I didn't want to put gold under it. So I went to the vellum, which I think turned out really stunning. You could, of course, have not added the little shadow layer. I just thought that it added a little bit more to the sentiment and kind of separated it from the leaves. And then you can see on the left-hand side there, those are the 3 leaves I'm going to use. I did cut out 6. I haven't separated my 2 leaf dies because I find it just easier to cut the 2 leaves at the same time, because generally I do use both, but you don't need to. You could separate them. I've just chosen not to. And then here we're going to adhere down the leaves so I can kind of show you the thought process on how I wanted to put this card together. So I did only put little dabs of glue kind of where the leaves and the stem are. That was just because I wanted to be able to kind of lift the leaves up and add a little bit of dimension. And you're going to see that I kind of play with the layout a bit. And then here I did adhere these 2 leaves down because I knew that the other leaves were going to go on top. So there was no dimension going to be had there regardless. So then I'm going to bring in the gold leaf. And I kind of originally thought I was going to tuck the white leaf underneath the gold leaf. I don't end up doing that simply because I put glue where I needed to adhere it, so it didn't work, but it doesn't really matter. And then I did again only add the glue to the stem and then right at the base of the leaves where it meets the stem, again because I want to add some layers to I want to add some dimension to the leaves, so I want to kind of prop them up a bit once everything is adhered and dried. So don't try to do that before your glue adheres, obviously, but as long as you only glue the base of the leaf and the stem, then you can easily kind of lift up the little leaves to create more dimension. And I did again just adhere down my thanks sentiment to the kind of the corner of the bottom there. And then I brought in some antique shimmer pearls because you guys know that I am obsessed with pearls right now. I just love how they look on cards. I'm sure it'll change. I'm sure I'll go back to gems soon, but for right now, pearls are just my jam and I am loving them. So these I brought in because I felt like they really went well with the colors that I kind of had going on here. And then here you can see I'm going to adhere the last 3 leaves that are left inside of my card base. And as I said, see, this would have been easier to do if you had done it to the card base before I adhered all those layers, because of course the front is heavier than the base is, so it kind of falls over and tips on me a whole bunch, but that doesn't really matter for this until I go and stamp a sentiment inside, because I decided I needed to add a sentiment. So I'm going to adhere all 3 of the leaves and flat. I can't add any dimension to these, of course, because the envelope the card will be closed. So I am going to adhere these completely flat down. And of course the vellum one's always a little bit interesting just because you can see a little bit of the glue through, but honestly it's not that bad. Like I do add a very small amount to start with, but also I've never had anybody say something like that. Like, first of all, anybody I send a card to would never come back and be like, oh, it's not good enough because there's glue, right? But everybody I've ever sent a card to was just super, super grateful and super sweet about it. So I don't usually worry about things like that. I do tend to avoid them on the front of a card if I can, but I mean, on the inside, you're going to read the writing. I don't know that it would really matter. But here I have for everything on a block, and then I'm just going to stamp that down between the leaves and in the Tattered Rose Distress Oxide ink, just because I thought it went beautifully with the card, and of course Oxide ink stamps stunningly, so that's kind of why I went with that one. You could have done any of the pinks though. And then here I'm going to hold up the card in all its glory so you can see it and see all that little bit of gold in the background there. You kind of see it when it catches the light certain ways, and I just think it adds something really stunning to the background. So that is the card I have for you guys this week. I'd love to know what you think. Leave me a comment, leave me a like, consider subscribing if you haven't already. I do brand new videos every Monday, and then I usually have other stuff coming out too whenever I have the time to get it up. So awesome. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye for now.